Hey everyone, today we're going to work on Procreate brushes and I'm going to show you the basics of creating your own brush out of your own illustration. So let's jump right into it and we're going to open the Procreate app and we're going to create our new canvas. I'm going to use a custom size and I like to make my canvases 8 inches by 8 inches and a 300 dpi. So you may be saying, do I need it to be that big? For a rule of thumb, I like to use the same size of canvas that I draw all of my illustrations on. You can play around with that, but I have found even a small canvas, 100 pixels, say by 100 pixels with a DPI of 300, you still get a lot of pixelization and you don't want that. So once we've decided on our canvas size and our DPI, now we're going to choose our brush. And I like to use the studio pen to do my illustrations. So I'm going to draw a flower today, and that's what I'm going to make my brush out of. So I'm just doing a loose version of a simple daisy. You can use any object. You can just do a shape, or you can do a very simple picture. I would keep it on the simple side so that you can get the idea of the detail that can show up and the detail that probably would make it too busy. You want to draw it the full size of the canvas, and then if it isn't the full size of the canvas, you can just resize it up until it fits the whole canvas. Once you've completed your illustration, you're going to want to save it to your camera roll. So go into the wrench tool, choose JPEG, and then go in and save image into your camera roll. And now we're ready to create the brush. So we're going to go into our brush settings and you're going to go to your main brush menu, hit this little plus sign up at the top right, and we're going to create our brush. So choose insert photo for the source photo. Choose it from your camera roll and then go down here and we're going to choose from the Pro library. We're going to choose a texture. All we want is a basic blank square. So scroll down till you find it. There it is, blank. That's what we want. Now we need to work with the settings. Now let's go back to source, and when we brought this in, see how it's black with white? Hit invert shape and you'll end up with a white background with a black line, and that's what we want. Next, we're going to go into general and we're going to use the stamp preview for our image, and we're going to work with the size limits. I usually put it around 500% for the max, and I move the minimum up just a little bit. See how it changes the size on the preview? And now we're going to go to stroke and we're going to take our spacing right up to the max. So now we should have a stamp brush ready to go, and we're going to give it a try here. So just to see how big this brush is, we're going to take it up to the max on the brush size, and there we are. That's the largest I have it. Again, you can change that in the general settings of your brush. So let's see how small we can make it. See, we can make it really tiny too. Really handy to have that illustration. Now it is a stamp brush, but if you drag it across, you'll get a couple stamps show up. So I can use it just like a stamp brush, but you can see that as I stamp it, I'm getting the exact same orientation of this flower. So let's just take those back out, and I'm going to show you how we can change that. Go back into your brush settings, and we're going to go down here to shape. Up at scatter, we're going to take it up to max. Now see, as I go around, each of the flowers shows up in a different orientation. Sometimes you want to control the orientation, and sometimes you just want a scattered look. This works really well if you're creating a design with multiple colors and you want each of the flowers to end up in a different direction. It lets you make a random scattered design. So what else can we do with this illustration brush? Well, I've shown you how to do the stamp brush. So let's go back in and try something different. I'm going to go into our settings, and I'm going to take the scatter off and go back into stroke and take the spacing down. Now currently I have it as a stamp preview under general. I'm going to take that off, and now I can see what my stroke is going to look like with my flower illustration. So you can get some really neat designs here depending on your spacing. You can make them spaced out so you can actually see the flowers, or you could make the spacing really small and you get kind of a neat textured line. And again, you can play around with the sizing of the brush so that you can get a very dainty, delicate look, or you can have large flowers. So I did take the scatter off, so you can see when I draw the line, the flowers again are all in the same orientation, and that's one effect that you can get. Now, if I go back into my settings and I go back into shape again, and I change my scatter back up to the top, now you're going to see that all the flowers are scattered in different directions. And when I draw my line again, now I get a lot more of a tossed look even though they're still in a line, you get more of a tossed look to the flowers. And there's a few more settings. They might not make a big difference with this particular flower, but if you go in and change the rotation to follow your stroke, the images will follow the way that your pencil moves. So it makes more sense with other designs, but it's another way to change the orientation of your illustration. And then there's this function called randomized. And what that does is theoretically gives you a different line every single time you draw it. Now let's try a different version of this same illustration brush. So I'm going to go back to the original illustration that we drew. It's back here at the bottom layer. I'm going to turn that back on, and I'm going to use that layer as a reference, and we're going to make a new layer and fill it in. So here I go, I open up the little side window here just by clicking on it and choose reference. And now we go to our new layer. Be sure you're on the new layer. And you're going to drag, and now the black just kind of blends in with it. I could do it in a color, but I really want my illustration to be black. So I'm just filling in the flower. So when we go back into the layer and turn off the drawing, we get this filled in layered look. And now we're going to go back in and save this image to our camera roll, where we'll be able to use it as a new source image for a new brush. So you can go back in and create a new brush, but I'm just going to use the brush we just made, and I'm just going to change the source image. So I'm going into brush settings, going into source, and here I'm going to insert photo from my camera roll, and I'm going to pick the new one that we just made, and I am going to play around with that one now. So on a new layer, I'm going to experiment with this brush. So it has all the same settings that we've just worked on with the other brush, so you can just see how it compares. Now let's try this one out as a stamp brush, and I'm going to play around with a bunch of different colors and create a multicolored stamped layout and see how my flowers, I have the scatter setting on, so they're landing in different directions for each one. Just a little side note, I do have a blog post to go along with this tutorial. You can find the link in the description below, and that gives you some of the still images and a little better description of the settings. It can be a little intimidating to follow along because the Procreate brushes do have a lot of settings. So definitely check that blog post out if you want a little more information about the settings. So the nice thing with the illustration brushes is they give you a starting point. So even though this is one flower and it's the same flower throughout my design, I can now go in, I can use my eraser tool, or I can use other colors with my brushes, different brushes, and I can add different personality to each one of these flowers. So it gives you an initial point for your design from which you can grow the design into something unique. So what else can we do with these illustration brushes? Well, if you have a painted background like I have here, and then I place a solid layer on top of it, here I'm going to use white, then I go into my eraser tool and I choose my illustration brush. Now I can erase off of this filled in layer and show you what's underneath. So I'm going to make it smaller here and maybe use it like a lettering brush. And see how I'm just erasing off of this layer, so the layer underneath is showing and it's making my flowers all multicolored. I could do the same with a black. It's quite stunning if you do a black layer and erase out of that one. What else can I do? Well, I'm going to take my scatter off and turn this back into a stamp brush, and I'm going to make a simple flower illustration. So I'm just going to use different flowers, each one on their own layer, so that I can orient them the way that I want them to be. And again, it's important that they're each on their own layer because I want to be able to adjust each one individually. And then I'm going to add some stem work, and I want this layer to actually be on the bottom underneath the flowers, so I'm not drawing on top of them. See how I can draw underneath them? And now I've made a cute little flower illustration out of my illustration brushes. So lots of ideas here for your illustration brushes out of your own drawings. It's really handy if you have favorite things you like to draw and you just wish you could have a brush that was out of that drawing. There you go. Now you know how to do it. So come on over and check out my blog on this particular tutorial, and along with the blog there is a freebie, and it is the flower brush that we've created in this tutorial. So you can download that for yourself for free at the blog, and the link is in the description below. So thank you so much for joining me today, and if you don't want to miss out on any of my tutorials that are coming up, be sure to sign up for my email list. You can do that over on my blog as well. So go have fun with that, see what you can create, and I will see you in the next tutorial.